Hello, Fix It Tony here. Thank you for coming back and watching another video. Today we will be flushing the power steering fluid out of the power steering system of my 1994 Mercedes C280. It's got a W202 chassis. You're wondering where the power steering reservoir and pump is, because that's going to be where we will be working today. And this is the reservoir, and beneath the reservoir, if you can kind of take a look, you'll see the power steering pump. You're also going to notice that we have two lines, one line coming to the reservoir and another line you can see down in there is the high pressure line. That is what's going from the pump out to the steering box and helping things move. So I'm gonna first clean up any oil. You'll also notice we have some damp hoses. A separate project is going to be to remove and replace the power steering hoses. We're gonna first start with this one right here, and then we will explore how difficult it is to do that one. So first and foremost, we're going to sort of clean up and get our tools ready, and we'll see you back. All right, before I get started on flushing the power steering fluid, I want to show you what tools I prepared myself to use. I'm going to try to keep clean by wearing gloves, rags, shop towels to wipe and catch any drips. I have a new power steering filter, original equipment manufacturer, man filter, good quality, original Mercedes full synthetic transmission fluid to replace. Normally you should be able to get by a flush with 2 quarts. I bought a third because this is my first time and I'm not exactly sure how successful I'm going to be to perform the procedures without using more than I should. A couple of options to catch and to keep my extra dirty rags, paper towels, old fuel filter. A large irrigation syringe. You can use a turkey baster or a vacuum pump with a reservoir, but you need something to extract the old power steering fluid out of the reservoir. I got this on Amazon. I got like 3 or 4. This will be my dedicated power steering syringe, so in the future when I, 50,000 miles, I'll just reuse the same one. A couple of pick tools. I'll show you exactly how to use those, but that's going to be used with the filter. A 10mm socket, 1/4 inch drive extension, hose clamp, some sort of a plug to plug the low pressure line. We'll talk more about that. Screwdriver and an 8mm socket for a hose clamp. We got to somehow get the hose clamp onto the low pressure line. That's part of the procedure. An empty jug to catch the old fluid, and depending on what size hose I use, I'm gonna need a hose clamp, so I got an assortment. So I will be jacking the front of the car off the ground with a floor jack, so you need a floor jack. I will be chalking the rear wheels. The car will be in, the parking brake will be put on, and pretty much I think this is all that I'm going to be using today. Thanks. Well, my syringe nipple tip was not long enough to reach into the reservoir around this nut, so I had to add a hose extension to allow me to get in there and remove the fluid. So I'm going to remove some fluid. It should be clear. I'm going to pour it into a clear glass mason jar. All right, so this is the power steering fluid sample that I removed from the car, this is what new power steering fluid looks like. So you can see that this is definitely old. Is it time to replace? Probably. So I'm going to go ahead and replace so that I can start the clock all over again and get 50,000 more miles. Now, when you're sucking fluid through a small opening, it does take a little bit more time. I'm going to take a utility knife and I'm going to cut a cross about 1 inch, cross, because I'm going to stick the hose that I'll show you in this hole, and that'll help keep this stable. Our 2 picks, we're going to reach in there. This one's a little bit too, maybe. All right. Then we're going to grab it and place the old filter. You can see it's pretty old. I have to drain the rest of the fluid from the reservoir. We don't want to introduce, okay, so I don't want to introduce, you can see way down in there, that's where the opening to the pump is. I don't want to introduce air into the system, okay? So what I want to do is get the level of the fluid below this pipe because I got to remove this hose, okay? So that's what I'm watching for when I'm looking down in there is the fluid beneath, and it is. So the next step is I'm going to remove this hose. Before I do that, I'm going to start stuffing rags underneath to catch any fluid that's going to drip out of that opening. I'm also going to be covering, I'm going to be removing this hose completely because I'm going to replace it. It's very wet at this joint, so I need to inspect why that's wet. The other hose will need to be replaced too. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stuff the other end, as you'll see, is connected right here, and the water fluid, the oil fluid is lower than where that opening is. So any fluid could have drained back in, and you can see that some fluid did drain back into the hole. Extract the power steering fluid that drained from the hose. This nipple looks in pretty good shape. I don't see any damage to it. And I'm just curious if it's going to fit. Yeah, good, it fits. Yeah, and then there, it's cracked. So the question is, can I do it with my finger? All right. There. Okay. There, now I got this out. You can see how this was leaking and dripping right around the seam. So I've got a wine bottle stopper. I'm gonna see if I can put it in here. Yep. The reason I did that is because the flush is going to force fluid out of this nipple. So it's going to, as the pressure from the steering box comes back up, it's going through must be going through a cooler, an intercooler of some kind. And then it's going to spit out here and go back here. So we're going to be wanting to extract the fluid out of this nipple. But let me see if I can use this. Yeah, I could use that too. I'll just have to find the right size clamp. Hi, I'm back. Okay, so I had this spare hose. This came, let's see, I just had this laying around the house. It came from a fish tank water siphoner. No longer have the fish tank, but I saved the hose. Have a hose clamp, and I'm going to shove that clear hose over top. Oops. There we go. And I have a slot screwdriver. I'm going to tighten this hose. Okay, it's not going anywhere. So as I was mentioning to you earlier about my gallon or my jug, so I have this hose wants to curve naturally this way. Let's see, yeah. See it, the hose is inside the jug. A little bit. Can you see that? Is that coming through on the video? So, you know, maybe I could prop that up with something. There. It's just a little bit more natural, right? I'm gonna put this tissue right there. First of all, there's no new filter in there yet, okay? So we're going to pour new fluid into the reservoir because we're going to then start sucking fluid through the system, and fluid should be coming out of this hose and not from that one. Is always have, when you're pouring fluids, always have a rag handy. So I'm going to be filling this up. Not quite full. There's a little bit of dripping here. Okay, let's just see what happens. started to move, but the issue was my camera was getting hit by the tire, so I had to move my camera a little bit into a new position. Okay, so I'm going to go lock to lock. But I have to be careful because my reservoir fluid is draining. I'm not quite to left lock yet, but you can see the fluid is draining through the hose. Okay, that's lock, that's to the left. I'm going to put more fluid in because I'm going to be steering now to the right. Okay, that's all the way to the right. And that's back centered. Okay, so I didn't lose too much fluid out of this nipple. Okay, and I almost have a quart. I got about a little bit less than half a quart left. So I'm gonna go left. All right, I don't know if you noticed, but I think I'm already noticing a color change in my hose from the color that it was, the old, to the new. So now that I've done this twice, this is where a helper comes into play, because I'm going to be pouring more fluid in of new power steering fluid. Here's a close look at what I put in to my C280. Just for reference purposes. I have my helper here, and I gave him instructions to start the car. Now my helper is 14 years old, so we'll see how this works. So my helper is going to start the car, and when the car started, he's going to start turning the steering wheel. He's going to be listening for me to say stop really loudly and urgently, and that hopefully his reaction time is as good as it is when playing FIFA. He'll be able to turn the car off before this fluid really drains down to nothing. Okay? So, helper, are you ready?
Yep.
Go ahead and start the car. Wait, listen to my stop. Go ahead. Stop! Stop! Good, 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 good. Were you able to steer the wheel a little bit?
Yeah, a little.
You can see how the fluid is really clear. Look at that. I think we're okay. Now, the question is, should I open up my third quart? Well, I'm going to have to, because I actually did use more than I thought. Because my 2 quarts are empty, and my reservoir is empty. So we're going to do this one more time, just like what you did.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Not yet. Let me fill up my reservoir with oil. All right, start it. Stop! Perfect. I think we got it. We're going to rebuild this hose with new hose, all right? So stay tuned as I continue that. So as I look at this hose, I'm looking at this part here, it's pretty dry and cracky. So I think it could have been leaking from here and also from here. So at least I'll replace this hose because it's available, it's easily accessible, and I'm gonna have to measure how long this sucker is. I'm gonna undo this clamp. Boy, this really got pinched deep. I wonder if, yeah, I'm gonna have to replace the other hose eventually. You can see the, I don't know if you can see it. Sort of the damage that the hose underwent. Question is can I get it? Oh, there, I did get it off. Let's see here. You can see how compressed the hose is. I can try and pull this out. That's a real bugger. I wouldn't be surprised if this is cut all the way through. You can see how buggered up it is. Oops. Oh, wow. So it's spinning, but I have to get this off. If something like this happens, I'm going to score a relief cut. Get my pick tool. I think what happens is there's a nipple right here and it's got to get past this. There. You see that nipple? It was parked right here and it had to get through that. So this hose I think was definitely shot. You know, I was wondering why my fluid in my reservoir went down. And then I realized I think I had a siphoning action going on. And I think I might have drained more than I wanted to. So now I gotta try to get this back in. Oh, darn it, that's a bummer. So it's gradually going in by gravity. I wanna blow it back in if I could. With my lips. I need to measure how long this hose. Okay, I'm gonna cut it right here. A hacksaw. Yeah, that was really tough. Let me show you this old hose. So it's wet again, right? And when I stretched it out, look at that, eh? Isn't that amazing? That's what was probably causing my leak on the floor. And this could have been why the other low pressure hose was wet, because this is how it sat. So if it was leaking from the bottom side, it could have just been dripping onto the other hose and then running down. So yeah, wow, I was not expecting that at all. Clean off this elbow. It's got a compression fitting. Let's make sure we get all the crud off. So you can see, so I push that back in, you can see that bulge. So that's gonna go in like that. I may have to adjust. I'm not gonna make this super tight. I wanna be able to spin this because when this is in, you know, I don't know exactly the best place to put this hose clamp so I can tighten it. So that's gonna be the final step. So can I spin this if I had to? Yeah, see? There, you hear that click? That means it's seated properly. Let's move that hose out of the way. And I gotta pull, see that? I gotta pull that back out. And then finger tight. This has to be finger tight. So you can see what I meant by this clamp. Yep, see, now it's gonna be the other way because this hose has to be like this. So, like that. So I'm gonna try to create the same pattern. So I'm thinking it's gonna be like that. So I'm gonna keep this more vertical as I tighten. Turn the wrench around. There. So I'm loosening up my hose here. That pushes all the way in, and then I start tightening. My clamp is bottomed out. I don't like that. I don't know if you noticed that. I think this hose is not tight enough because this clamp, I can still move it. I probably should have put a new clamp in. This clamp bottomed out. So, all right, here's my problem. Now that my reservoir is filled, a new clamp on that sucker. This is a newer clamp. A little bit too small. This is a little bit bigger. So I'm gonna have to pull that hose off, plug it with my finger, work with one hand. Okay, I can do that. I should have thought of this in the first place, but I didn't. This is the clamp that's gonna go down on the bottom. This is the clamp that's gonna go up here. All right, so this is kind of what it looks like, finished. So I tried reusing, I don't know, I gotta go back to the video clips. I tried reusing the old clamps, but they were a little bit too big for this new hose, which is a little smaller. So the clamps would completely bottom out and the hoses were still loose. So I do have an assortment of hoses, hose clamps. But I did replace these clamps with new ones that were the right size, and I clamped them down. Now, given that this is a new hose material, and it's more malleable. This could compress, and I may have to come back and just check on these hoses, make sure they're tight. So for example, it's been a while. So this is, I can still turn this. So I'm gonna, see, I can still turn that. So I'm gonna clamp down on that a little harder. Let's see if I could twist this one. Not really. So I think I need to tighten this one a little bit more. And I wipe down this hose completely, so it's completely dry and clean. So I'm going to be assessing this hose periodically to determine if it's leaking. I did fill the reservoir up. I'm going to fill it up to about a ½ inch below the rim, and I'll be reinstalling the spring clamp and hose. Well, this has minimum, so I guess minimum at 20 degrees C, maximum at 20 degrees C. So this looks like a fluid level. So let's take a look to see how much fluid if I put too much in. So when you put the nut back, you have to remember you'll be using a 10mm socket, and you're going to want to put it back. First start it by hand, and then you're going to be pushing this float down, and you're going to be putting that nut until it bottoms out. Obviously it takes a while. Now, I'm not even going to try to apply any torque. There. I'm going to turn the car on, move the steering wheel side to side, and see if there are any air bubbles. Try to get rid of the air bubbles. So, hopefully, I do see the level lowering. Oh yeah, you see a bubbling? I thought I saw a bubble. Yeah. So what I'm gonna do is put that on tight. I'm gonna start the car, 2 seconds, and let go, and then turn it off. So we're gonna try to keep bubbling, bleeding the system. Dial this one up a little bit more. That one is tight. Hello, I'm back from my test drive, and I must say that the results of the test drive were positive in my opinion. I did not hear any noises from the power steering system. It was quiet. It almost felt to me that the steering was more responsive. So it's a pre-post, whether or not it's a Hawthorne effect, who's to know, right? But nevertheless, what I do want to say is that I am satisfied with the outcome. But what I am going to do is check for leaks. So I'm checking for leaks around this hose. So I'm pinching right at the very, very tippy tip. And it is dry. I'm going to wrap it around here at the very tippy tip down at the bottom. See if we can wick any fluid from this connection. Connections are supposed to be dry. All right. That's dry. What about here underneath this hard thread? Dry. How about underneath this old hose that was loose? Unbelievable, it was loose. That was probably why I was leaking fluid under my car. Dry. Okay. So I believe I removed enough power steering fluid to call this job done. I will be putting the cover back on and tightening this up. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, like the video. I would say my final thoughts is with the putzing and getting the right tool and changing the clamps, I probably spent maybe 3 hours on this job by myself for the first time, even though this video might be cut down to 20 minutes. And I still have a lot of cleanup to do. So keep that in mind when you're preparing to do this job. But I would say it's definitely doable. I was able to do it. I watched some videos online. That helped. Hopefully this video was detailed enough to help you in your efforts to keep your car running properly and without having to overpay at the garage. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.